Briefing will be beginning also in just a little while on what's shaping up to be perhaps the biggest day of the Trump administration thus far. The House is set to vote on this final version of the massive Republican tax bill, the same one that the president promised by Christmas. It will overhaul the nation's tax code as we know. If it all goes as planned, the Senate then will vote after the House, and the president is expected to get this bill and sign it by tomorrow. Now, when he autographs this, he and his party will have achieved landmark tax reform, the kind not seen since 1986. And the president himself will end the year on a huge high note, finally getting the first major legislative victory of his administration. Yet, here's the but. This 570-page tax law hailed by the president and his party has been panned by the people. A new CNN poll shows 55% of Americans oppose it. So let's start there and go back to Capitol Hill to our correspondent, Sunlen Serfati, who's been watching all the latest movements here. And so talk about that magic number that the House needs for that win and, the expected timeline of the day.
Yeah, the timeline is so important here. In the next 15 minutes or so, they will be voting on the floor on a Democratic procedural vote. Then they will move, Brooke, to the vote on the Republican tax bill. They need to hit 217. There's no drama here. Republicans believe and know that they have the votes to get this passed along party lines over in the House. And we saw just in the last few minutes, Speaker of the House Paul Ryan taking something of a pre-vote victory lap on the floor. He spoke at length about taking a step back here to really put this moment that he's been fighting for in context, that this hasn't been a tax overhaul has not been passed for the last 30 years. Certainly a significant moment for him as Speaker. He says this is a day I've been looking forward to for quite some time. Today we are giving people their money back. So the House will proceed to vote in about 15 minutes, and we expect that it will indeed pass. Sends it over to the Senate, where Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has said that he intends to move to a final vote in the Senate later tonight. It could be very, very late, but at the end of this day, Republicans up here on Capitol Hill, Brooke, feel very confident that they will be sending a final bill to President Trump's desk for his final signature by tomorrow.
I like how you put that, a pre-vote victory lap. That is precisely what we saw from the House Speaker there. And as we wait for these different numbers to fill in, and as you highlighted that magic number 217, Sunlen, there has obviously been a lot of back and forth in terms of substance and policy within this bill. Can you just give me a couple of the headlines on who this benefits the most?
Yeah, so a lot of back and forth, and I think even after the passage, if indeed that's what it does, and that we believe that will, I think that's a discussion that many Republicans will continue having. What exactly is in this bill? Who is this benefiting the most? First, a few of the top lines that we've reported over the last days and weeks. It repeals the Obamacare individual mandate. It sets the corporate tax rate at 21%. That's down from 35%, and that remains permanent. It caps mortgage interest rate deductions at $750,000 and caps those state and local tax deductions at $10,000. Now, on the tax brackets that we've been talking so much about, this actually, this proposal, this bill that they're voting on, keeps 7 personal income tax brackets. The lowest rate stays there, as you see, at 10%. But check out the differences, if you can see there, among the other brackets. It lowers the rates for most of all of them, especially that top individual rate there. It's down from 39.6% to now 37%. So a lot of details to this massive, massive tax overhaul. But again, at the end of the day today, Republicans looking for a win.
Sunlen, thank you so much. We'll stay in close contact with you, and we'll keep our eyes on the screen here on the House floor as the vote is set to get underway in just a couple minutes. And then after the fact, presumably a massive victory lap over at the White House with that White House briefing. Before we get there, I have with me CNN's political director, David Chalian. He is standing by. CNN national political reporter Maeve Reston joining us in just a minute. CNN White House correspondent Abby Phillip, and Jim Tankersley, tax and economics reporter for the New York Times. So welcome to everyone. And David Chalian, I mean, the big question, the obvious question, I mean, this is a huge, huge deal for the president of the United States, on the verge of really his first major legislative win. But first on Paul Ryan, I mean, I think I even heard him he using phrases like recapturing our destiny and something he's been looking forward to, joking, since the second grade. What did you make of that speech there on the floor?
That may be true about Paul Ryan, actually. We know he's a bit of a tax nerd. So this is something that goes to the very heart of sort of what Paul Ryan has been working on and espousing on his time on Capitol Hill. You got to remember, let's go back over the last year, Brooke. You and I talked about a lot of polling that had come out that showed that Republicans were telling us that they were really blaming the congressional leadership and the Republican majorities in the House and Senate for the inaction this year. They weren't blaming President Trump. And Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell were keenly aware of that, as were their members. They also know that they are heading into an election year facing a ton of headwinds coming at them. And so the one thing that they have gone to their members and said, if we don't go back to our core voters and say we've accomplished one of our major promises, they're going to have our heads. And so now you are going to see Paul Ryan and the House majority, you just got a taste of it there, tout this success. At the end of the day, much like what has happened with Obamacare, people will feel better about these tax cuts down the road.
I mean, let's just drill down on some of the numbers to the point you were just making. On our new CNN polling, opposition to the bill has grown 10 points, Maeve, since early November. 55% now oppose it. That's 33% actually favoring these proposals to reform the nation's tax code. I mean, this is the day, David, said it perfectly. They had to deliver on something huge, and this is their delivery to that base. But with these poll numbers, Maeve, is it worth the gamble?
I mean, I think that they felt, Republican strategists felt like they had to have this victory or else the midterms were just going to be done for them. And so the fact that it is so unpopular, it is a huge gamble. But, if they do a good job of selling it next year, if people are feeling like they have more money in their pocket, as David said, then we could see a very different sentiment about the tax bill and, people starting to feel like things are starting to roll in Washington. But the midterm voters that they are going to have to target, a lot of them, won't necessarily benefit very much from this bill at all. And so that's going to be really interesting to watch next year, especially in those districts where you have vulnerable Republicans and that Hillary Clinton won in 2016.
Maybe this is the message to help some of those Republicans. Abby, I saw this tweet from Bloomberg Sahil Kapoor. Sahil tweeted, if this bill passes, Trump Republican Party will have repealed the Affordable Care Act individual mandate, cut taxes by $1.5 trillion, opened up ANWR judges, killed a lot of regulations. This is not a trivial agenda, Abby.
I think that's pretty much right. We got to the end of this year not exactly sure how taxes would go because we've gotten so close on health care and those other votes did not go through. So it was unclear whether they would finally be able to get something, because I think the judges issue is important to sort of movement conservatives, a lot of Washington conservatives, but this Trump White House understands that what they need to do is deliver something that people can see in their homes and at their kitchen tables. And that's what tax reform has the opportunity for them to do. I think this White House is feeling pretty good right now because they're closing out this year having done at least one big thing. They had hoped to get two, they got one, and they got the repeal of the individual mandate. They're feeling pretty good, and you're going to hear in a couple of minutes a little bit of that from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. They're waiting until this vote happens before she comes out so that she can tout this really important moment for this White House.
So Abby made a great point, Jim, and I want to talk to you just about the meat and potatoes of this, how, this is a way for folks to see how this translates around their own kitchen tables. We saw the rollout at the White House and how effective that was PR strategy-wise when we saw all those families come forward and saying, essentially, thanks, Mr. President, here's how this is going to help me and my family. But again, here's the but. 2/3 of Americans, according to our new CNN numbers, see the bill as doing more to benefit the wealthy than the middle class. And almost 4 in 10 Americans say that if the bill becomes law, their own family will be worse off. Yet this is what Paul Ryan said earlier today.
When we get this done, when people see their withholding improving, when they see the jobs occurring, when they see bigger paychecks, a fairer tax system, a simpler tax code, that's what's going to produce the results. Results are going to make this popular.
So, Jim, for all of the Americans watching and wondering, how does this affect me? How much do I really benefit? And I mean, not just next year, but longer term. who stands to benefit the most?
Well, if you're watching this and you're American, you're probably getting a tax cut next year from this. That's just the simple truth, is that in the first year is a tax cut for almost everybody. Not everybody. There are millions of families, particularly some middle class, upper middle class families, who will see tax increases, especially in high tax states. But in the first year, it is a tax cut. It's not a huge tax cut for a lot of folks, but it's a substantial one. And now what happens over time in the bill is that those tax cuts fade for a lot of people, particularly in the middle class and for lower income people. By the end, if the bill stays as written, by the end of the 10 years the bill calls for, all of the tax cuts go away. And so then you might you would see tax hikes on basically everybody. So in the first year, Republicans are betting that those benefits will be so great that people aren't worried about what comes down the line. And what we've seen in polling, and you're seeing as well, is people having a lot more concerns, perhaps looking farther into the future.
I'm trying to pull up this tweet, the LA Times editorial board. This is just part of what they just wrote. The Republican Party's rushed, haphazard approach to tax reform feels like a long weekend of binge drinking. It may be fun for them while it lasts, but it's sure to be followed by a head-splitting fiscal hangover. Just one group's opinion. Obviously, Republicans are thrilled about what we're all about to witness, presumably. Please, let me just ask all of you to stand by. Any moment now, voting is expected to begin on the House floor for this Republican tax bill. We will take that live. Stay with me. I'm Brooke Baldwin. You are watching CNN's special live coverage. We're back. You're watching CNN. I'm Brooke Baldwin. Live pictures of the House floor. Voting set to begin after this procedural vote there to begin voting on this Republican tax plan. It is expected to pass, right? So this is the House, and it goes on to the Senate. But keep in mind, as we're all watching all these numbers flash up on the screen, ultimately the number that we're watching for is 217. 217 is good enough for the House to pass this thing. I've got my panel back with me, and David Chalian, can you just take us on to the floor of the House and walk us through what exactly is happening and what to watch for?
Well, as you said, we're going through a procedural vote now, and then we'll be on to the real vote. And here's what is key. You already heard from Paul Ryan. That's sort of the messaging around this. They're going to have the vote to tout. We'll hear from Sarah Huckabee Sanders. And if the Senate is able to finish its business tonight, and this gets on the desk of the president tomorrow, the key here is going to be President Trump, how he marks this moment in time visually, from a message point of view, before people are fully immersed into the holiday break. He really is going to try, as you saw him starting to do yesterday in his speech, to try to end this year with some better spin on the ball here. You read that list, Brooke. I thought it was a good list of all those Republican accomplishments that the Bloomberg reporter had tweeted. I would also add to that, people in America are feeling much better about the economy than they have in years. Obviously, the president is touting on a regular basis the stock market numbers, and yet
his approval rating is so low.
His approval rating is hanging so far low. So his behavior in office is preventing him from reaping the rewards of all that list of accomplishments, the good news on the economy. Usually that helps a president. That is not helping him right now because he's getting in his own way.
Jim, what do you make of that? I mean, normally you have these two data points, right? You have an economy that's doing very well, and then you have a president who typically does very well. They're inextricably linked, and in this case, with the new numbers on the president's approval rating, all down to 35%. Again, one of our numbers here at CNN, and yet you've seen the boom on Wall Street and beyond. How do you reconcile that?
Well, we've done some polling with SurveyMonkey actually throughout the year, and what we found is that the president's approval rating is highly correlated with economic optimism. In fact, it's the number one correlation in all of the poll, which tells us two things. One, that the president is helping to lift people's assessment of the economy among people who like him, but also that his rating would probably be a lot lower if people weren't so optimistic about the economy right now. So if in a weird way, that interplay is really helping the president on one side of this equation. On the other side, I think we are seeing with people who don't think this bill is going to help them, the tax bill, some of that's just a proxy for how they feel about Trump. And if they continue to not like the president, they may be less inclined to credit his tax bill, his signature tax bill, for any improvements they see in their own paychecks.
Once this bill wraps, and presumably passes. And as David said, it could get to the Senate tonight, and then bada bing, bada boom, this thing lands on the president's desk tomorrow for his autograph, which is a huge, huge deal for this White House. Abby, to you, we will then see Sarah Sanders behind that podium with the mega victory lap. What do you expect to hear from her?
Well, this is a White House that's really keenly focused on keeping promises. I think you're going to hear a lot about that today and tomorrow and for the rest of this week. In addition to what you'll hear from Sarah Sanders today, I think we can probably expect to see the president today having a major unveiling of this new policy that he's been able to put on the table, because the White House believes that their supporters are less focused on the nitty-gritty, less focused on the ups and downs, and more focused on whether Trump is down to the approval rating of this tax bill. It'll be interesting to see how that fares long term. It is possible that people are reacting to what they've heard about the bill in the back and forth, the horse trading, and that there is a possibility that once they see a little bit more money in their paychecks, they'll be happy with it. But it's also possible that that it's not as much as was promised. You're going to hear the president say they're going to get a very big Christmas present. If in January people are seeing a small Christmas present, it's unclear how that's going to affect how they feel about this bill. Maybe they will feel like there were big promises made and what was delivered to them was smaller than that.
So it's interesting. I think you're totally right that it will be from Sarah Sanders and from the administration. See, we promised this tax cut for you, and we're delivering. And oh, by the way, that individual mandate, Obamacare, bye-bye, that's gone as all part of this. And so my question, Maeve, to you in terms of how this translates, fast forward to the midterms in 2018. How will that translate for those Republicans, specifically in the Rust Belt states? Will that be enough to help them along?
Well, I think that is a huge question that we can't answer right now, because, as you know, so much could change between now and then. Everything from the Russia investigation, if that starts to capture people's interest more, make them more concerned about sort of stability in the White House. How the economy is doing next year, right before the election, that will have so much to do with how they vote. And really the question, that Democrats are trying to sell to people is, you want a check on Trump's power. So, let us move in and take control of either one chamber or the other. Trump is making you weary, his tweets, his behavior. That's what they're selling to people. And will a tax cut be enough to, balance that out? We don't know yet.
That's the question. That's the question. Yeah. I got you. Just again, quickly, just a play-by-play on what we're looking at now. We're still waiting for that official tax vote to begin. They've had this procedural vote. They're still in the middle of that, I believe. Check me, talking to my control room. 5 votes that they're waiting for that procedural vote to wrap, and then we will move on. Okay, I'm being told that they're voting on it now. Shall we dip in just for a moment and listen? Let's listen.
Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
There they go. They're now officially voting on this massive tax bill that the Republicans are planning on having this be a huge, huge win here. Again, that number 217, that is the number of yay votes they need for this massive tax bill to pass. So we're going to stay with these live pictures from the House floor. And David Chalian, just over to you. We have some sound. Let me play this and we'll talk on the other side, because of course all the focus is on the House right now, but then it moves on to the Senate, as you pointed out, later this evening. And so we have some sound just in from the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell on selling this bill. Here he was.
Regular working people. Well, as you've heard all my colleagues say, the facts are not irrelevant. And so we're just beginning to make the argument to the American people. And they're going to see, as Senator Blunt pointed out, that in fact they do get more on average. And I think the argument is still out there to be won. Look at all the indicators of optimism. Look at although I don't want to overemphasize quarterly growth rates, but I think 2 quarterly growth rates of 3% are pretty significant. Look at the stock market. Look at the optimism. I think the American people are going to begin to feel that the country is moving again after 8 years of relative stagnation. Thank you.
Okay, so that was to the Senate Majority Leader there, and you heard key words: stock market, optimism. We've got another voice, Mark Preston. Let me just bring you into this conversation here as we're watching this this House vote on this tax bill. We hear language like this. We hear language from, we saw Paul Ryan a bit ago on recapturing our destiny.
Right.
This is about promises kept. This is about follow through. What's your assessment as we are just about a minute into this?
Well, a couple things. One is, I think what you said at the very end, promises kept and about follow through. If you go back over the past, 11 months of the Trump presidency, there hasn't been any successes. There hasn't been any follow through. There's been a lot of mistakes made by the administration and on Capitol Hill as well, not having all their ducks lined up. But as we talk about this tax cut right now, and Republicans will talk about spurring economic growth, and in the long run, that will offset the additional money that it's going to add to the deficit. The fact is, we're heading into 2018 right now, and this is the kind of vote, I believe, that is going to energize the liberal left. It's not necessarily going to energize the Republicans, because what they're going to say, and we've already seen some people that were pulled out of the House chamber in the last half hour or so, screaming down there, because what we're going to see from the liberal left is that Republicans in power are going to continue to try to do these types of things that they are against. And it's a lot easier to try to get your grassroots activists charged up to oppose something, as opposed to getting them charged up to say, hey, great job in getting that done. So this vote, while it's taking place right now in 2017, is going to have great influence on what happens in 2018.
That is exactly what I was just asking Maeve Reston about, but I realized a lot can happen between, what are we, December 19th, and next November. David Chalian, to you, just on Democrats. What's the Democrats' move once this passes?
There's the vice president there, Brooke. He's going to preside and be part of the messaging operation from the administration today, even if his tie-breaking vote isn't needed in the Senate. Well, it looks like you're over the margin there, Brooke. 224 yay votes. So the bill has, it looks like it has enough votes that it's passed.
Let's listen. Let's listen in, David. Okay, a little bit of a pump fake. I think there was some applause, so we wanted to just dip in. But you're right, 226. All they needed was 217. So there you go, David Chalian.
There will be plenty of opportunity to get applause. I have no doubt. I think the speaker's
Is that the vice president at the top there? No, I don't think he's quite made it in there. He wouldn't be on that side. Go ahead.
But to answer your question about the Democrats, you're going to hear the Democrats make the argument that so far has been the winning argument with the American people, that they see this as a tax bill that favors the wealthy over the middle class. They're going to make a class argument. I am very curious to find out, and I ask a lot of Democratic strategists this right now. I wonder if next fall this bill is going to be something in their ads, or if they are going to be more focused on health care, Trump investigations, and all things Donald Trump more than this bill. It's hard down the road necessarily to run against a tax cut. It's a little easier to run against tax hikes.
Do we know, I was just looking, we've all been pouring through all these numbers, and it was 73% of Americans, all part of the CNN polling, want President Trump to release his taxes publicly, right? And this is all germane, once again, because people are also wondering, well, how does this translate for the Trump family, right? How does President Trump, how much money does he stand to benefit? Because we keep hearing from the White House over and over and over, this is for the middle class America. But, as you just heard Jim lay out, yes, it's a bit of a tax cut. Maybe people will be hoping it's a bit more in January and be surprised it's not maybe as big a chunk of change. But after, that first year, it continues to get smaller and smaller. And so still that thirst for, tax returns and I guess reign supreme.
It's a thirst that the president has ignored and will continue to ignore. So even though 3/4 of Americans would like to see him release his tax returns, he obviously got elected president, bucking that tradition as a candidate. And I doubt he's going to feel any public pressure from the overwhelming majority of Americans who would like him to do so to actually do so. So all we have to go on is one of his tax returns that we've seen a little bit of to say that he's not right when he says that he is going to get hurt from this bill. Indeed, the American people also in our polls say, as you were suggesting, that they think he's going to be a lot better off because of this tax bill, personally, his family, than he will be worse off.
Okay. What are we waiting for, David Chalian? I'm just picking on you since, are we waiting for the final gavel?
We are waiting for the vote to come to an actual close. The clock has run out. It looks like Speaker Ryan is getting instructions from the parliamentarian there, and that he may be prepared to bring. There it is. There's the
there
gavel.
it goes. There was the gavel. Let's listen.
Have all members voted? Does any member wish to change their vote? On this vote, the yeas are 227 and the nays are 203. The conference report is adopted without objection. The motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. Finished business is on the vote of the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Dunn, to suspend the rules and pass H.R. 4323 as amended, on which the ayes and nays are ordered. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 4323, a bill to promote veteran involvement in STEM education, computer science, and scientific research, and for other purposes.
The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass the bill?
Okay, so you heard it. The gavel thrown, and the House Speaker saying specifically 227. So that was 227. They needed just a 10 less to pass. They got it. You heard some applause and I think maybe a little bit of booing from the House floor as this Republican tax plan has officially passed the House. And Maeve Reston, over to you, heads on to the Senate. And then, I asked Abby, but I'll ask you the same question because we also know that the White House press briefing has been sort of waiting to begin, contingent upon this vote. It passed. What sort of messaging are you expecting from the White House this afternoon?
Well, I mean, this is such a rare moment for this administration, where she can come out and give good news. I mean, what's been so remarkable about this bill is that the messaging around it has been really quite terrible. I mean, the stories that you see are constantly about, how this is going to help the Trump family or his quote unquote cronies or his donors. So she really has a moment to come out here and, make the case that the American people are better off under the Trump administration, that they have delivered on, a major piece of legislation finally. I mean, the fact that they accomplished so little throughout this year, with the exception of the regulatory agenda and loosening regulations, is just been a huge struggle for the Trump White House. And now she can come out here and gloat and, walk through the ways in which they think this will help the economy, which is already, doing pretty well. But they really have a lot of convincing to do today, obviously, as we're seeing from these poll numbers. And I think you were hearing Mitch McConnell say we're just starting to make the argument. Well, they better get on that because so far the messaging's been terrible.
I mean, the messaging has been terrible. Mark Preston, over to you. You've seen the poll numbers, the polling, 50, according to the CNN polls out today, opposition to the bill has grown 10 points since early November. So just 33% of Americans say they favor this. Despite all of that, though, and we're just reading Phil Mattingly's guidance from this morning, looking ahead to today, it's like it's been full barrel ahead for these Republicans. Go, go, go. Let's pass this thing. Why take that gamble?
Well, because, look, as Paul Ryan had said in his floor comments last hour, they had to, they gave a promise, and they said they were going to follow through on it. And in fact, they have done so. What I do think it's important about the numbers, though, as we do talk about the lack of support for the bill, overall, there's lack of support for the bill. And we have seen a drop in of 10 points, as you noted, from November to today, which is amazing, right? I mean, that's a huge drop. However, if you look at the Republican support for the bill, that actually went up over the past month. And right now, it is 76% of Republicans support the bill. So if you are a Republican congressman right now, if you are a Republican senator, and you look at that support from amongst your base, that's actually a pretty good number, given the fact that, as Mabe was pointing out, the messaging around this bill has been incredibly bad. And I think that you have to look at the White House and say that the White House hasn't necessarily been a great wingman for congressional Republicans in all of this. So as we have been saying and been talking about, this vote today is going to have ramifications in 2018. I think David Chalian's right when he says, I don't know if it's going to be the ad that is done. There could be a lot of ads that Democrats are going to do. However, you will see Democrats and liberals try to excite their base by noting that this tax cut is actually going to help the wealthy much, much more than it would help the middle class.
David Chalian, we've got some live pictures there up on the Hill, and of course then we're waiting for that White House briefing to begin. I don't know if we'll hear from some of the members momentarily in this this win with, what was it, 227 yays to pass it.
Nice 10-vote cushion there.
Nice 10-vote cushion. Yeah. What are you watching for? And just also curiously, we did see the vice president pass through some of the hallways a bit ago. What's his role looking ahead to the Senate?
Well, he is, the president of the Senate. That's his nature. It's where he gets his paycheck from. He is the presiding officer of the Senate.
David, forgive me. Here's Sarah Sanders.
Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. That brings us one step closer to the president making good on his promise to deliver tax cuts for Christmas. We are looking forward to the Senate vote later this evening, and the president will be monitoring these developments throughout the day. As December winds down, I thought this would be a perfect opportunity to look back at what has been, by any measure, a historic year. Nearly 1.7 million new jobs have been created, and the unemployment rate has fallen to 4.1%, the lowest rate in 17 years. The stock market reached a record high more than 60 times and closed above 24,000 for the first time in history. We've rolled back 22 regulations for every one new regulation, saving taxpayers over $8 billion and liberating America's economy from the grip of bloated government. We've withdrawn from or began renegotiating the trade deals that once threatened to destroy American industry and shipped our jobs around the world. We finally set up our nation on a path to not only energy independence, but energy dominance. We approved the Keystone XL and Dakota Access pipelines, directed the EPA to end the job-killing war on coal, and upon the tax bill's passage, will have opened up ANWR to responsible energy exploration. The president has protected America's communities. We've seen the lowest level of illegal border crossings on record. We ended the Obama administration's dangerous catch-and-release policies, restoring law and order both on the border and in the interior. And we've designed and built 8 wall prototypes for the border wall. We've taken unprecedented steps to tackle America's opioids epidemic by directing the declaration of a nationwide public health emergency, and we promoted peace through strength. Under the president's leadership, ISIS has lost nearly all of its territory and its most important strongholds in Iraq and Syria. We've restored old alliances, forged new ones, begun rebuilding our military, and made it clear to the world that there is no greater ally, no more fearsome adversary than the United States of America. We've reshaped the American judiciary for generations. Justice Gorsuch was confirmed to the Supreme Court, and 22 judges have been confirmed, including a record-setting 12 circuit judges. We protected life by reinstating and expanding the Mexico City policy that protects $9 billion in U.S. taxpayer dollars from being used to fund abortion. And this evening, hopefully upon passage of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, the president will have delivered the most significant tax cut in the history of the nation and repealed the Obamacare individual mandate. The president has delivered on promise after promise, issue after issue, time after time, and we're just getting started. As some of you may have seen yesterday, Disney World debuted its animatronic President Trump for its famed Hall of Presidents. In the president's remarks for the exhibit, which he recorded here at the White House earlier this year, he said, "From the beginning, America has been a nation defined by its people. It's why our founders began our great Constitution with 3 very simple words: we, the people." In the coming days, political analysts will write and the talking heads will discuss what this year means, what it means for the president, what it means for the Republican and Democrat parties, and for the never-ending political theater in Washington, D.C. but I would encourage everyone to take a step outside of the Beltway bubble and consider what this year means for the American people. To the forgotten men and women around our country, you are forgotten no more. This president is with you 100%, and as this year has already proven, he will never let you down. And with that, I will take your questions. John.
Two questions on tax reform, both of them quick if I could. First of all, what's the schedule for signing? I understand this may not happen until after the Christmas break.
Look, we're still working on the details of the signing, but first we want to make sure it gets passed. That's what we're focused on right now, is helping make sure we see this through to the finish in the Senate, and then we'll announce plans on what a signing would look like and where it would take place following that.
Second question, the carried interest provision. This is something this is a loophole that President Trump promised again and again and again to close. The carried interest loophole is still there in this bill. Why did the president not insist on getting rid of that?
Look, the president was focused and he laid out what his 4 biggest principles were that he wanted to make sure were part of any piece of legislation. We feel that the piece of legislation where it is now certainly answered and addressed that. That has been our focus all along, and what we've continued to talk about consistently here and every time we've talked about taxes.
The president has said that this tax bill is going to cost him a fortune. It's actually not the case. How does he figure this is going to cost him a lot of money?
Look, we expect that it likely will, certainly on the personal side, could cost the president a lot of money. Again, the president's focus hasn't necessarily been at all on himself, but it's been on those 4 principles that we laid out. Number 1, and priority number 1, being that it helps the American middle class. We know that this bill does that, and that's one of the biggest reasons that the president has supported it, been engaged, and will look forward to signing it hopefully in the coming days.
So he's going to benefit from pass-through deductions, top rate tax reduction, estate tax exemption is doubled. He's going to make money on that.
Look, again, this is a tax plan that we hope benefits all Americans primarily, and priority number 1 is middle class Americans. That has been this administration's focus. We feel like that is certainly addressed and been prioritized in this legislation, and we're going to be very excited to sign it hopefully in the coming days. Matthew?
Thanks, Sarah. Early reports are indicating that fatal Amtrak derailment out in Washington, similar to the 2015 derailment in Philadelphia, could have been prevented by positive train control, which Congress back in 2008 mandated was supposed to be on all lines by 2015. That's been pushed back, and it's only on a quarter of passenger lines right now. Is this White House considering any steps to speed up the implementation of positive train control to stop these kinds of accidents?
Right now, we're continuing to review and investigate exactly what took place yesterday, and once we have a more detailed determination on that, we can take steps to prevent things like this from happening in the future. John?
Thanks a lot, Sarah. You ticked off a number of accomplishments that you see the president has made in his first year in office. Why are his approval ratings mired in the mid to upper 30s despite those accomplishments?
I think oftentimes because while the president and this administration has been very focused on how we can better help the American people, I think oftentimes the media is focused on other things, certainly not talking about the growing economy, certainly not talking about the crushing of ISIS, not talking about the creation of jobs. If you look at the amount of time that is spent on negative coverage of this president, 90% of the coverage is negative about this president, when, as you just said, I listed off a number of things that have been pretty historic in nature in this first year. And if people were focused a lot more on those things in the media, I think that his numbers would be a lot higher. We anticipate that they're going to go up as more and more of these things continue to happen, and particularly as more and more people start to feel the impact of the booming economy, the tax cuts that'll take place later tonight and go into effect in the first part of February. I think those are all things that are going to help boom our numbers.
And separately, Sarah, just if I may, Matthew Peterson, since we last met, withdrew his judicial nomination. And there's been a viral video of his inability to answer some basic legal questions when he went up before his confirmation hearing. How did he sort of slip through the cracks? Why was he nominated? And are you doubling up your effort here at the White House, over at DOJ, to make sure that your judicial nominees can answer those basic questions when they go up to the confirmation hearings?
Look, the president's judicial selection process has led to a historic pace of confirmations, including 12 circuit court justices and a Supreme Court justice. Every administration has individuals that don't go all the way through the process. We've had 60 nominees and only 3 that haven't gone through this process. That individual has withdrawn, and we're going to make sure that we fill that spot with a really strong and good qualified candidate. Dave?
Thanks. Where was the president watching when the House voted, and did you see his reaction? What did he do?
I'm not sure. I'll have to circle back with you on that. I was getting ready to come out. I was watching to make sure I didn't make you guys wait too much longer.
One thing on nominations. Can you explain, now that we're near the end of the year, why the president has submitted far fewer names to the Senate for nomination than his predecessors at this point in this term?
Look, we've been focused on filling positions as quickly as possible, but at the same time, the president has said before he doesn't think that every single position in the government needs to be filled. He's going to cut back on some of those positions. We've been focused on some of the top priority places, and we're going to continue filling out individuals. But we've also seen a massive slowdown and obstruction by the Democrats. Hopefully they'll continue to push our people through, particularly in individuals that were held up, whether it's in the judiciary or something that falls under the national defense profile. Blake?
Thank you. Let me ask you a couple questions, pick up where John Roberts left off. He asked you about the carried interest loophole. You said essentially that it fell within the president's 4 main principles that he laid out. How is keeping the carried interest loophole, or at least a portion of it, good for the middle class?
Look, the big priorities that we had, I'll go back, were make it easy, make it fair, win again, and bring it home. We feel like this tax legislation certainly does that. There were provisions that were put in place that directly help and benefit the middle class. They see more of their money come home. They see child care tax deductions double. There are a lot of things that are going to impact the middle class, and we feel like those things address the need to really help give them that boost, and we think that this absolutely will.
Let me ask you this way. An individual who makes roughly $83,000 would pay about 24% with their rate. Somebody who benefits, a millionaire, tens of millions, potentially hundreds of millions, if not more, still might pay 24% on that money. Does the White House believe that somebody who makes $83,000 paying as somebody who's potentially hundreds of millions, do you guys believe that is fair?
Look, again, I'm not going to get into a back and forth on a detailed hypothetical situation that I don't have in front of me and that I can't quickly do the math on, but I can tell you we feel like this plan fully addresses helping the middle class, giving the majority of middle class Americans more of their money back, and that's what we've been focused on, and we feel confident in that. Jordan?
Thanks, Sarah. I actually want to ask about UFOs. Several media reports this week disclosed sorry.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's a coincidence or not. I feel like I already want to pass on this question, given that you've got aliens sitting among you.
Several media reports disclosed the existence of a secret Pentagon program that was researching UFOs. Funding ran out for that in 2012. Does the president believe in the existence of UFOs, and would he be interested in restoring funding for that program?
Somehow that question hasn't come up in our back and forth over the last couple days, but I will check into that and be happy to circle back. Jennifer?
Has the president made sure that the IRS has the resources it needs to implement these new tax reform rules?
We understand that they're fully prepared to take action immediately, and that people will see the benefits of this tax package start at the first part of February, and we've confirmed that with the IRS. Major?
Just to follow up on a couple of questions, were you saying that this particular judicial nominee who's withdrawn after this viral video of his inept performance at the confirmation hearing didn't properly go through your preparation and vetting process?
No, I didn't say that. I said that we have been focused on pushing forward good candidates. We've put forward over 60 nominees. We've had 3 individuals that have had to withdraw. That individual was one of them. And we are focused on making sure we fill that position with somebody that would...
Based on your process, you thought he was prepared?
We, again, are looking always for the best and brightest, and when we felt like that wasn't necessarily the right person for that position. He has withdrawn his nomination. We haven't continued to go forward. That is pretty standard in most administrations. In fact, every administration prior to us has had to withdraw nominees. We've had to withdraw 3 out of 60. Look, I think a lot of people are focused on just those 3 and not at the overwhelming number. The president has had his nominees confirmed at a historic pace on that effort, and many of them with bipartisan support, including the 12 members of the Circuit Court and the Supreme Court Justice.
That's a serious question. You don't disagree with what she said about the personal benefits that will accrue to the president based on provisions in the tax cut bill?
I said that we expect
they will benefit him personally.
Look, I said that in some ways, particularly on the personal side, the president will likely take a big hit, but on the business side, he could benefit. But the biggest focus for this White House has been to make sure all Americans are better off today after this tax package passes than they were beforehand. We really focused on invigorating the middle class and making sure they got more of their hard-earned money, and we think that that'll happen in this package. No.
Sarah, you said the focus is on the middle class. Why was one of the last provisions put in lowering the top bracket, and did the president support that, and why did he, if he did not support it, why did he not insist that that not be added at the end?
Look, some of the back and forth, we respected the process. A lot of that took place in the House and Senate. We've been engaged in that process, but we laid out what our 4 priorities were. We wanted to make sure those happened. That was our focus in the process, and we felt like those priorities were met.
Does that help the middle class to lower the rate for the bracket for the top individual earners?
Some economists think that it does, and I'd be happy to refer you to some of them that it would give you a very deep
important pieces of legislation that Congress has passed in decades to help the American worker, to help grow the American economy. This is profound change, and this is change that is going to put our country on the right path. For all those millions of men and women in America who are living paycheck to paycheck, who are struggling to get ahead, help is on the way. For all those businesses that are tied with one hand behind their back in this global economy, having a hard time compete, help is on the way. I want to thank Chairman Kevin Brady. I want to thank all the men and women who made this possible. This has been a long work in progress. And what this achievement marks is a promise that this majority made, that is a promise this majority is keeping. We said in 2016 that it would take real tax reform for families and businesses to get the American economy growing, and we were serious. And the American people placed their trust in us to do this work for them. And today, we're making good on that promise. We're fulfilling that promise. And this promise being kept today is one of the most important things we could do to get the U.S. economy growing faster, to help people get bigger paychecks, to have a fairer tax system, and to simplify the system so people can have more peace of mind. So Kevin said it the right way. On January 1, Americans are going to wake up with a new tax code. In February, they're going to see withholdings go down so they see bigger paychecks. And April 15th will be the last day they have to comply with the old bad system. This is a good day for America. This is a good day for workers. This is a great day for growth, and we're very excited about this moment. Thank you. Question.
Mr. Speaker. So you have said that you've spoken often about the tax cuts that families will see in the first few years of the plan. What can you say about the tax cuts that individuals will see in the end of the next decade? Because the JCT analysis showed that some lower class...
We have every intent of making those permanent because of the Senate rules. You know why that sunset is there. So it is obviously our intent, like times past, to make all those permanent.
So the impact will actually be bigger.
Casey.
Mr. Speaker, Congress doesn't have the greatest track record of planning to do something later and then following through. How can you guarantee Americans that they're still going to see the benefits of this tax cut?
Look at what we've done right now. We were planning on doing this tax reform bill all year long last year. We worked on it all year. We ran out of it in 2016. We spent 2017 working on this legislation, and here it is. We're getting it done. This was a promise made. This is a promise kept.
Last question.
Yeah.
Mr. Speaker, does the lack of Democratic support mean that this tax overhaul is vulnerable the same way that the Affordable Care Act was vulnerable and ultimately going to be changed today?
I think the comparison is a non sequitur because the Affordable Care Act proved to be extremely unpopular. The Affordable Care Act proved to reduce health care choices, to raise premiums, to make health care unaffordable. This is going to do the opposite. This is going to grow the economy. It's going to increase paychecks. It's going to increase take-home pay. And that, I believe, is going to be very popular. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it.
comments that the governor has made previously, that every time they've asked, the federal government has delivered. We want to continue to be partners with them with this and make sure that we rebuild, and that's what we're doing. And that's why the president has sent 2 members of his cabinet directly to deal with that and be on the ground in Puerto Rico to further assess and see what other necessary actions we have that we can take.
This situation, Sarah, you're getting a lot of questions about what will benefit the president, what won't benefit the president. I get that he doesn't want to release his taxes. That would obviously put all of these questions to rest. So can you just elucidate why for 2016 the president can release his taxes? Why won't he do that and put all of these questions away, back up what you're saying, prove that what you're saying is correct? That's the way to do it.
As we've said many times before, the president's taxes are still under audit, and until that is completed, then we wouldn't move forward on putting his taxes out.
John, the why part of it, Sarah, and I don't mean to belabor it, but I understand that the president wants to wait until after the audit.
I don't think
I'm
it's that
asking
complicated. As long as they're under audit, he's not going to release his taxes. His taxes are under audit, so he's not going to release those taxes. John,
these questions direct. He doesn't worry about that.
I think we've addressed this a number of times. I'm not sure why answering it another time will make the answer any different. John?
I have 2 questions on Russia. First, the Kremlin has recently threatened Twitter with a complete shutdown throughout Russia if it continues to carry the Twitter account of what they call undesirables, notably the dissident Mikhail Khodorkovsky's Open Russia group. They've made a similar threat to YouTube recently. What's the administration's reaction when the Russian government wants to shut down American-run businesses bringing an expression of opinion to their country?
Certainly, generally speaking, we would not support a government shutting down American businesses, and I don't know why this would be different, but I'd have to look into the details on that specific action and request that they've made.
The other thing on Russia, Senator Rubio has introduced legislation to name the street in front of the Russian embassy here after the slain Russian dissident Boris Nemtsov. Senator Corker has blocked it. Does the administration have an opinion on this?
Not that I'm aware of. Nita?
I wanted to ask you about the path forward on the Export-Import Bank. Now that the Senate committee is saying that Scott Garrett's name shouldn't go forward, does the White House think that it needs to name someone else to
Look,
run?
we're going to work with the committee on a path forward that hasn't yet been determined. We're certainly very disappointed in the Senate Banking Committee missed an opportunity to get the export-import banking fully functioning again, and we're going to work with them to determine the next steps.
On his name or someone else?
More generally speaking, just a path forward. We'll let you know if it's going to be with that individual or a different plan. Brian?
Just a couple of quick follow-ups. First on Matthew, he was asking about Amtrak. There was a budget request, as I understand, from the president for $630 million reduction in the long-distance Amtrak routes. Because of the accident in Washington, do you plan on revisiting that issue? On Matthew Peterson, the 3 that were turned down, it's our understanding that they had close ties to the White House. So you're going to try to change the vetting process? And then finally on the one on UFOs.
Let me start and do one at a time because I'm not going to remember all of those questions. If we have to, we'll see if we can get to all of that. The first one was on judicial nominees.
Well, the first one is on the Amtrak.
This is why we didn't skip and let you take 3. Yeah. So on Amtrak, as I told Matthew a few minutes ago, we're going to wait until that investigation is complete and there's a more thorough review, and we'll talk about next steps once that's done. In terms of the judicial nominees, I've walked through that a couple of times now. We have put through 60 individuals. Only 3 have had to withdraw or not gone forward in some capacity, and that's pretty standard for any administration. Every administration ahead of us has had similar challenges where they've either withdrawn or not gone forward.
Their ties to the White House, because it's looked upon as those were friends of the White House, and that's why they got that nomination. Are you going to change the vetting process? Are you going to look at it more closely?
I think if we were so focused on friends that were close to the White House, those individuals would be moving forward and not having withdrawn. James.
Sarah, the new national security strategy specifically calls out Russia for using subversive tactics to interfere with the affairs of other countries. Why didn't the president use that kind of aggressive language in his speech yesterday?
Look, the president has weighed in on Russia and his feelings on that a number of times. The policy and the strategy put forth in that very detailed paper was that of the president, and it reflects his views. And, you know, he's didn't read every single page of it word for word. I'm sure you're all thankful for that, because we certainly could have. Maybe I should do that for the next briefing. But look, the president's been clear what his position is. We've been tough on Russia. We've put sanctions on Russia. We've imported energy and impacted them in a big way. The president has not been soft in this process. He chose to focus on different things in the speech, but those things were included in the national security strategy because they're important and they're part of the administration's viewpoints. Jill?
Thanks, Sarah. Two things. Firstly, just wanted to go back to the Scott Garrett issue. Does the president at this point regret having nominated someone who had advocated previously getting rid of the Export-Import Bank to lead it?
Not that I'm aware of. I'm going to take one last question.
And I also just want to ask, I understand the president spoke with Prime Minister May today. Did they have any discussion at all about the president's planned visit? Have you settled on any timing for a potential visit?
That invitation has been extended and accepted, and